Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. So today, welcome to the first Aussie version of the reading group. I'm so excited to have you all here. Or well, I guess there could be other people. Maybe somebody in the US just wants to get up at 6 a.m. And have this before their workday. I mean, I can see the joy of that as well. So wherever you are, welcome. This month we're well, all the time in this group, we're reading The Great Tradition by Richard Gamble. And The Great Tradition, it's classic readings on what it means to be an educated human being. Richard Gamble, and I can actually see if I can dig up, I interviewed him when I used to have a podcast, and I can see if I can dig up the interview and send it to you all. But I was able to ask him about his thought process behind it and why he wrote it. And what's really interesting about Richard Gamble is he wasn't really inside of the classical movement. He didn't identify as somebody who was propelling the classical education forward. He was a professor, and he was deeply interested in, hence the subtitle, what it means to be an educated human being. And so this humane education. So his entry point into this was a little bit different than maybe some of ours, who are classical teachers wanting to build classical schools, wanting to push the classical movement forward and such. Richard Gamble didn't identify with any of the factions that we see in the classical movement. And so when he wrote it and published it, and he saw the response and who started reading it, he was kind of surprised. He's like, whoa, okay. I didn't realize there was all these groups out here that, and yeah. So that was really interesting. And he, of course, we talked about the selection process, because that's the question I think a lot of people ask him is, why didn't you include this person, or why did you include this person? And he acknowledged that there are other people he could have included, and this is what he felt was the most significant for his project. But there, you could move into other realms of the discussion, and by that I mean, for example, what do the Chinese have to say about what it means to be an educated human being? He didn't really go east, but one of the things he did say is that inside this great tradition, that every culture has its tradition, and we can look into each culture to find that. This one is particular to the West. The people that he chose writings from, but that does not mean that there aren't many others and many other nations that are speaking just as deeply, and even with some of these authors from many other nations. And so that can be our work, if we're interested in that, to explore those other authors and to add them to this conversation, and to also notice what they say. So I wanted to preface it with that this isn't a statement about this is the only tradition in which people speak about being an educated human being. Okay, so that's a little background about the book. And then Irving Babbitt, since there's a couple of people who didn't have the book, I'm just going to read the introduction for who he was to ground us. It's just a couple short paragraphs. So Irving Babbitt, he was the founder of the American New Humanism movement, and he was born in Dayton, Ohio, in the last year of the Civil War. He descended from early Puritan settlers and a line of Congregationalist ministers. Babbitt attended Harvard, where he studied ancient and modern languages, including Greek, Latin, French, German, and Italian, and took his degree in classics in 1889. He then removed to Paris, where for 2 years he taught classics and studied Sanskrit and Pali. After returning to earn an MA at Harvard, he taught briefly at Williams College before coming back to Harvard yet again, teaching there for nearly 40 years, from 1894 until his death. Despite his training in the classics, he taught French literature at his alma mater. Babbitt married in 1900, formed a close professional and personal relationship with Princeton's Paul Elmer More, and built an international reputation as a distinguished literary and cultural critic. His students at Harvard included T.S. Eliot, With more, Babbitt founded the movement known as the New Humanism, based on a Socratic concern for carefully defined terms. And we're going to see this come up over and over again throughout his writings. Clear principles of discernment of that which is worthy of our love, and a belief that the individual will and appetite must be always restrained. The New Humanism, as distinguished from John Dewey's secular humanism, so we have invitation to compare here, rejected both Baconian power over nature and romantic sentimental humanitarianism as proper goals for education. Bacon and Rousseau were twin manifestations of the modern expansive imperial self. The New Humanists believed, as opposed to the disciplined self-essential to true humanism. At some personal risk, Babbitt also attacked President Charles Eliot's reforms at Harvard, including his innovative elective system that dismantled the college's unifying prescriptive core. I think it's fascinating that he was there alive in the moment that happened. Several of his articles for The Nation, The Atlantic Monthly, and other publications were collected in 1908 as his first book, Literature in the American College, Essays in Defense of the Humanities. Other major works include Rousseau and Romanticism and Democracy and Leadership. So the selections that are included in the Great Tradition are the first and sixth chapters from that collection of essays. The first one really zeroing in on what is humanism, which is a big word that we use a lot. You see a lot in the classical education world. In fact, I found a lot of classical educators consider themselves, especially Christian classical educators, consider themselves Christian humanists. And so this should be of particular interest to us as we're thinking about the philosophy and the way that people think inside the movement. This is specifically, this speaks to it a lot. And then this chapter 6 focuses on teaching the classics, and he's examining the how people approach teaching the classics. And you see a lot of what he begins talking about in chapter 1. Let me pause here. The opening quote to this whole section is a quote from him: "Cosmopolitan breadth of knowledge and sympathy do not by themselves suffice. To be humanized, these qualities need to be tempered by discipline and selection." So one of the things you're going to see with Irving Babbitt over and over again is he keeps going back to this harmony of extremes. That's one of the main things he deals with in chapter 1. But even in chapter 6, you just see this theme coming up over and over again for him. For him, there seems to be something very important, or the solution to these problems he's exploring, in the harmony of extremes. So I'll pause there. So in I'll say one more thing. Chapter 6 then, so he is dealing with this problem of how to teach the classics, and how it used to be viewed, and how people are beginning to approach it now, and how people are beginning to approach it in this more humanitarian way versus a humanistic way, and what effect that has on how we read and how we think. I could just keep going on, but I'm going to pause for a second because I want to include you all as well. For those of you who read, what has stood out to you the most? Because I mean, I have so many notes everywhere. I could monologue about so many different things. This is my first encounter with Irving Babbitt, I will be honest, and I am totally in love. I'm just like, I want to read all his stuff. I am so excited about it. So what have you been noticing, Con, thus far?
Yeah, look, I'll be honest with you. I'm a type of person that needs to read it maybe 2 or 3 times to get the gist of it. I'll be honest with you. I find that everything in this book is very deep. So So I need to read it at least two or three times. But look, just from reading it the first time, it's all I can say is that yeah, look, he's humanism. It's like you're saying, it forms part of our rhetoric. When we're talking about classical education, what does it mean to be a true human being? Obviously for me as a Christian, someone made in God's image and likeness, that stands out for me as important.
Mhm.
I was on, is he a Christian? If you don't mind me asking, is he a Christian? Irving Babbitt? Do you
I
know?
was wondering the same thing. I mean, he definitely has Christian roots, but he doesn't seem to make any statements throughout his writings that indicate to me that's his current belief. I think maybe he could go either way. I'm not sure. It's something I need to look up because I was curious about the same thing.
Yes, but look, he might be, maybe he might not be, but look, I still respect him, because
Yeah.
as you said, we're all human beings, and but look, I just congratulate him for writing this, and yeah, so yeah, and again that word humanitas, so very important,
Mhm.
Obviously, Greeks call it philanthropy. Saying, I'm just going with page 541. Sorry, Helen, no, that's not in front of you, Helen.
That's okay.
Yours will come
Because I
eventually.
haven't read it. I've read a little bit about who he is,
Yeah.
but I haven't read the book, so I'm just listening in.
Look, I read the part where you said, Jennifer, about the Socratic method. So obviously, that struck a chord with me. The Socratic method. Yeah, but look, as I said, I really apologize. I really need to read the whole article again and to really immerse myself in it. But yeah, sorry. I would.
No, you're totally fine. Helen,
Jennifer,
I'm gonna send you photos of these first two pages. I'm sending them to you in LinkedIn.
It's on the way, apparently. I've been tracking. It's on its way. But do you want us to start from the first chapter? Is that what we do? Or you've given us readings, haven't you?
Yeah.
Oh yes. Yeah. Okay. So did you so in the welcome email to the welcome email from that you got, that was an automatic email when you joined the list, there's a calendar, kind of like an outline of the year. And so how we are approaching it, hold on, I'll send you this other one. Okay, I sent you the first two pages as a message in LinkedIn. So
okay.
So how we're approaching it, instead of reading straight through, I wanted to jump around in time periods. So if you in the table of contents, he has the thinkers listed chronologically, and I've divided them up into time period. So classical, my categories are from Plato to Plutarch is classical, from Philo to Gregory the Great is early Christianity, from Alcuin to Aeneas Sylvius is medieval, Erasmus to John Milton is Reformation and exploration and counter-reformation. And then from Giambattista Vico to John Henry Newman is Enlightenment. And then Irving Babbitt to Eric Vogelin is modern. And so for each month, we'll read one from the from one section. So this month is modern. We started in February, so we started with classics. So we did Plato first, then we did Alcuin, then we did Erasmus, then we did Vico, and then we are doing Babbitt right now. So we'll go back to the classics, and we'll be reading Xenophon. And so I thought that was, I liked jumping around, so we had some more variety and weren't in the classics for like an entire year. But that we could feel something of all the different times. Yes. So I chose to do it for that reason, to add some interest and more comparative, just the way the book, this kind of thing works. I don't think it matters. I don't, I mean, maybe somebody would argue with me, but I don't think it makes that big of a difference. Maybe it does, but this is the way I chose to do it.
No, I think this is a good way too. It's good to do it in a variety of different ways, because it depends on what, because it gives you a quick overview as well. I think, because sometimes we just take so long to read, but you
Yes.
can't keep up. Yeah, so this gives you a bit of an overview, and you can get into it and then read as you're going along. Yeah,
I
like that.
agree. And the other thing I've noticed is that, so it's kind of like the difference between drinking an entire bottle of wine and wine tasting. Like
Yes.
when you're at a wine
Mm.
tasting, you try like 6 different wines, and all of a sudden you're able to, with greater accuracy, discern the difference between them. And so by putting the classical author next to the medieval, next to the early modern, like so quickly, we're able to distinguish some differences and similarities with greater accuracy more quickly, rather than drinking a whole bottle and then waiting until, you know, next week to drink
Yes.
a whole bottle, or however
Yeah, no, that's
however
good.
often you drink a whole bottle. I don't
And then we can
whatever
read
that
at our
happens
leisure.
for you. But yes.
That's good.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to then talk through some of the things that stood out for me since, and then let's feel free to just talk about the ideas. So even if you haven't read it, it's okay. You can still talk about the ideas, ask questions. If something feels confusing, or you're wondering about something, or you notice something, by all means, be in the conversation and participate. Okay. So in chapter 1, what I really liked, well, what really stood out to me, and was grateful for, is he really focuses on what is this difference between all these different human words. He says, where, let me, on, is it page? Oh, here.
So the difference between humanistic. That's a good. That's good.
Oh, yes. On page 541 and the top paragraph, middle of the top paragraph, he says, we evidently need a working definition not only of humanism, but of the words with which it is related or confused: humane, humanistic, humanitarian, humanitarianism. And you know, to point out one thing in here, a working definition. So right before that, he really establishes the importance for definition, and he's like, hey, the whole Socratic method. Oh, actually, that's where I'll start. In the middle, sorry. Also, I want to apologize ahead of time if this annoys anyone, but I'm not that much of a linear thinker. I am practicing that discipline and becoming better, but I tend to jump all over the place. So I apologize ahead of time. Feel free to be like, whoa, say that.
No, that's
fine. About the middle of the first page, the Socratic method is indeed, in its very essence, a process of right defining. What do you guys think about that? Have you ever heard Socratic method described that way?
As a right, so what's it say? As a right, oh yeah, it's as a what? The right definition, a right defining. Yes, yes. The Socratic method is indeed, in its very essence, a process of right defining. Yeah, yeah, very important. Yes, my initial reaction to that is you have to get the definition right. What do we mean by the different words? Because everyone's got different interpretation or views of the word, and we all have to be on you know, we have to know exactly what we mean by the word. What do we mean by the word virtue? What do we mean by the word education? You know, to lead out, for example, is that right? Educara, to lead out. So, you know, what does that mean? So, for some people might say, Jennifer and Helen, education means something else. It doesn't mean to lead out. But if you go to the root of the word, yeah, I'm just giving. So I think it's very important. You need to have a very accurate definition, because then you'll get lost. You'll get lost. You'll get lost.
Yeah.
Especially the word humanitas, humanitarian, humanitas, humanist, I think, because it brings you back to the human being. So I think that's really important to get the essence of what that really means, and to be able to, because you know, it's often used, you know, with the humanities. We talk about the humanities, but if we have the correct understanding of what it actually means, and we're using it all the time, I think then other people joining us will also have the definition of what that means in classical terms, I suppose, too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we're educating humans and our whole
Yeah.
claim is
Mm,
this is all about yeah, knowing what we mean by human, that's good. I was really
mm,
surprised by this because I had never thought about, I've thought a lot about Socratic teaching and the Socratic method, reading
mm,
Plato's dialogues. I've thought a lot about that, but I've never had the thought that the Socratic method is indeed, and its very essence, a process of right defining.
mm,
But as soon as I read that, I was like, that makes sense. I mean, isn't that what Socrates is doing? So when I think of
mm,
Socratic method, I think of Socrates' way of questioning people, like how
mm,
he embodies his practice in the dialogues. Um, but immediately he's like, well, what do you mean by virtue? And what do you mean by that? And can you give me examples
mm.
of that? And then can you give me more examples of that? And then what do you mean by that? And it's just kind of, for some people, infuriating. Other people, it's like, oh, light bulb moments. But I think this line has a lot, can be really interesting to discuss, or instructive to us, because of how many ways that people talk about Socratic discussions, I've heard people talk about Socratic discussions, and really what they mean is a literature discussion, or just
Mm.
a discussion where
Socratic
people are
circles.
talking and there's
Yeah.
energy.
Mm.
Go
Mm.
ahead.
I was going to say Socratic circles because they use that in literature quite a bit, and for movies as well. But there is a process that they follow when they're doing the Socratic discussion,
Mhm.
and there's a process that he follows, or he gets everyone to follow. I think that's probably what is similar with all Socratic discussion. There is a
Mm.
process that
Yeah.
he uses to get to the truth,
To bring out
or
the
to,
truth.
yes,
Yeah.
to bring out the truth. So, for example, I was doing uh, love. I actually did courage and love, and one of the I used the film um, A Beautiful Mind. I don't know if you remember that movie, A
Yes.
Beautiful Mind.
Hmm.
And the students had to take a quote out of that and use that particular quote to get really close to what love might be. But we
Mm.
followed that procedure of that constant questioning, and everyone has a position in their group. So you've got the interlocutors, you've got the leader, you've got the people who take notes as well. So it's quite formal the way that he does it. So it is definitely a process of defining, because
Mm.
everyone's, my students at the start said love. Well, it's a feeling, and by halfway through the year, because we spent a term on it,
Mhm.
the idea of what love is was very different than the idea of love that we started off with.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's
Yeah.
very, very interesting.
I'm curious what the so when you say Socratic circles, are you talking about that book that was written about it and like the particular process, or
I use Socratic inquiry method, but I
uh-huh.
have also used the circles for
Okay.
literature. Um, in the creative area for religious education, I used films, but then I used his Socratic method. I don't know if you've ever found that before. The method that I've used, I can send you a sample of my lesson if you like,
I would love to.
on how.
I'm always curious how people organize it. But you said
Mm,
it's called the Socratic inquiry method.
yeah, inquiry method. Yeah, that's Socratic inquiry method. So I did it for a whole year actually, and the kids loved it. But you got to train them though. You got to take them through the training, and they get it fairly quickly. And you could use any of the. I mean, I used a film to start off with, but later on I used the Ring of Gyges. I don't know if you read the Ring of Gyges.
I have not.
No, you could use. There's so many of works, classical works that you can use for them, but I use the big concepts of courage and love, all those type of concepts to get the students to understand that they're more than just what we feel like, and they actually go deeper into the idea of it. Mm,
Oh, that's really good. Yeah,
mm,
when I the two ways that I learned Socratic inquiry, well, first was the Socratic circle method, which I later questioned, like, is this really is this really what Socrates was doing? And so I had questions about it. But then when I was I was a part of the Circe apprenticeship, and we learned about a triangular way of imagining the Socratic teaching moment to include 3 main stages. Have you ever seen that, like the triangle? Have you guys seen that?
Yeah, I haven't seen a triangle, but
It's like an
it
upside down
sounds-
triangle.
Yeah,
Is
no, I
that-
haven't seen that one.
Okay,
Hasn't
so
Circe-
I'm going to draw it and show you. Go ahead.
Hasn't Circe brought out like a document, a PDF on that? On the
I don't
Socratic-
know.
Yes, yeah, I remember last year, Andrew Kern put something up on their website. Yeah, maybe you've got it, Helen or Jennifer.
Well, I'm
Um,
drawing it right now, and
no.
I'm gonna.
Right. But yeah, but please
trying
do.
to work
Okay, so
out.
it's like this. Do you see that?
Yes, yep.
Okay, so at the top,
Yeah.
so you start here
Wow.
and you go like that. So the top begins what is called the ironic phase. And so the idea is somebody says something and you're like, is that true?
watch.
Is that true? You have that thing inside you that you're like, and that's when you begin. The goal of the ironic is to deconstruct whatever the idea is. And how I've come to understand that is because I think some people approach it in different ways. Is some people deconstruct the person, like it's like becomes this, and so I think you have to be like really careful entering into this, that it's this loving, like, let me understand you. Like deconstructing can look like, let me understand you, or it can look like, let me humiliate you. Like, and it depends on the ways of being of the person, which way it goes. But then the hope is that it leads to the metanoia moment, which is they realize, oh, I didn't have the right view of that. Okay. So they see kind of their error. A lot of people stop there. But the full Socratic discourse is exactly what you were saying, Helen. And this is why I was so struck by the right defining. I'm like, oh, that really is another way of saying that. Is then you enter the maieutic stage, which is similar to the idea of like being a midwife. Then the goal is, now that they've recognized the error, then we can lead them to the truth by more examples and comparisons and questions. And it births out of them, but we are there as their guide. And so that's the framework they teach in the apprenticeship that I learned. And that's been helpful to me to conceptualize that. But I was like, right. I guess that is another way to know the truth. I just never thought about knowing the truth as right defining, like, because when I think of defining, I just think of this basic definition, but that is what he was doing.
No, there's layers of thinking, and once you get them, it takes a while. Once you get them in there, they have all these aha moments. Students are incredible when there's a different buzz in the classroom. So it's not just about learning facts. It's about them going into this place, into this liminal space where they can see things differently. It's an awakening, really. That's what it is. It's an awakening.
Amen. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And as you were talking, the other term that kept coming to mind was intellectual energy and conducting intellectual energy. Yeah. Okay. All right. What else? Okay. So this next section, he's really zeroing in on the difference between, so he focuses in on the word humanitas or humanistic and humanitarian or humanitarianism. So he puts these almost, and he puts these in a juxtaposition as, I don't know if he would say opposites. Maybe I'm imposing by saying opposites, but definitely juxtaposes them as these are two different things. And people tend to go culturally and individually to these extremes back and forth, or sometimes you'll have a tendency to be more on page 541, section 1, he says he uses the word promiscuous benevolence to refer to altruism. And I was like, what? So this is where he's beginning to talk about humanitarianism. That hurt a little bit. I'm like, don't you want me to love my fellow man? But he's trying to point out this extreme of humanitarianism where he says that in opposition, or not opposition, maybe that's not the right word, that sorry, my coffee is not, I actually recently quit drinking coffee, so I'm like still my words are not all the way out. The humanist is more selective in the humanist is more selective in his caresses. So he said the poet Schiller, for instance, speaks of a humanitarian and not as a humanist when he would clasp the millions to his bosom and bestow a kiss upon the whole world. The humanist is more selective in his caresses. Aulus Gellius, who was a man of somewhat crabbed and pedantic temper, would apparently exclude sympathy almost entirely from his conception of humanitas and confine the meaning to what he calls cura et discipline. And he cites the authority of Cicero. Cicero, however, seems to have avoided any such one-sided view. Like the admirable humanist that he was, he no doubt knew that what is wanted is not sympathy alone, nor again discipline and selection alone, but a disciplined and selective sympathy. Sympathy without selection becomes flabby, and a selection which is unsympathetic tends to grow disdainful. So this goes back to that first quote that we read. But this is a really good paragraph that kind of sets up like this whole comparison that he's making for the rest of the chapter. He keeps going back to these ideas and showing it and discussing it in different ways. The humanitarian, the sympathy and the discipline, over and over again. What really strikes me about this and through this whole chapter, I'm like, this is our culture. I don't know how it is in Australia, if it's like this as well, but in America, this is what it feels like to live here. There's like the people, it feels like it's divided into these two extremes a lot of times, where it's either you love people and you're liberal. So like I heard this one speaker talk about the biggest difference between Republicans and Democrats, or liberals and conservatives, is that the primary value of Democrats or liberals is the care of people. And the primary value of Republicans or conservatives is the preservation of freedom. And these two primary values lead us to prioritize different things. That doesn't mean that somebody who prioritizes freedom doesn't care about human dignity. And it doesn't mean that somebody who, but like I see him pointing out the same kind of thing, that, and this is like an age-old philosophical debate from the beginning of time. Philosophers have been debating, is it altruism or egoism? Is like, which one is primary? Is it the individual or the community? This keeps being an issue over and over again. And it made me wonder if we can actually solve it. And I think it's really important for the classical renewal, because and you'll get to it on pages 544 and 545, but he's talking about the same thing. And he said, where did it go? Oh, he's talking about how cultural movements were reactions to the ones before. So the Romantic period was a reaction to the Enlightenment, and the Renaissance was a reaction to the stringency of the medieval. And as I was reading this, one of the thoughts I had is, because he's also, as he's discussing this, talking about the exclusivity of humanitas. So that's one of the things he points out, that humanitas, in the essence of its word, is aristocratic. It's exclusive. It was for a few, and he defines the cultivated man as someone who has disciplined faculties. So he did distinguish, like, the cultivated man, the man who has humanitas, has disciplined faculties, and the persons who don't aren't cultivated. And which then brings up this conversation to me about access and who we offer this education to, and who this education has been offered to. And then for the first, if it ever has been imposed on people, what was that reaction? What he brought up for me is the question of whether classical education should be imposed on anyone ever, or if we do impose it, like, will the reaction always be a, what's the word he used? Well, that reaction of kind of like the Renaissance reaction to the medieval, they see it as confining, they see it as oppressive. Is that always what will happen when you impose anything? And if it is, and I'm just wondering here out loud, if it is, should we, really the question of should we ever impose classical education on people? But if the reaction will always feel like there will always be a group of people who find that to be oppressive just because we're imposing something, maybe we don't ever impose it. Maybe we remain exclusive but open to all. Like, what would that look like? And how do we protect this renewal that we're in from, can we protect it, or is it just part of society can we protect it from that reaction later on that, oh, this is oppressive, don't tell me what to do, and then they don't see the beauty in it. They don't, because I mean, I am imagining the medieval monastics who would offer this education to people and how beautiful that must have been. But then there was all these other parts of the culture that people railed against. And I don't know if there is something there or what the answer is, or if there is really a question worth asking in that, but that's what this section was really making me start think about in a new way. I'd never thought about the renewal in that way. Like, what are the effects of the decisions we're making now? And what is the reaction to it going to be? And is there a way to approach it? Is there some wisdom here in Irving Babbitt about this harmony of extremes that is deep wisdom for us as we make decisions? And sometimes, yeah. So what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I just like to say, I just like to
No,
say
go on, goes up.
Yeah, what you've been saying, Jennifer. What the books I've read so far, the articles, the podcasts I've listened to about classical education, they all talk about the ordering of the loves. So I think, I mean, for me, classical education is important because we hope that the students are going to love the right things, you know, and are going to say no to the things that they should not love. I mean, that's what brought me to this movement, Jennifer. You know, the ordering of the loves. You know, I think that applies to every human culture. You know, we all want to love the right things. You know, whether it's looking at a tree, you know, listening to a bird sing, for example. Another thing, I don't want to confuse both of you, or three of you, I should say. I mean, I'm Greek background, Jennifer, but human in Greek is anthropos. Now, have you ever looked, Helen, and I don't want to change the topic, but I'll be 20 seconds. Look at the etymology of the word anthropos, human. You know what anthropos means? To look up. Yeah, means up.
I've actually written it down. I've got anthropismos.
And that Helen and Jennifer, we know that the Greeks had a high view of man, you know, and you know, I know that Andrew the Kern have said that, and so do others. So I just want to conclude this section, Jennifer and Helen, by saying that, you know, humanitas is good, but I like the word anthropos because it means that I need to be looking up. You know, I'm not looking down. You know, I'm looking up. No, and when I think of looking up, that means I can be someone better. I aspire. Is it the word? I aspire to be a better person. You know, I look up. You know, look up. I don't want to change your frame of thought, Jennifer. But that's
that's good.
Refute me. Refute me.
Humanity. I mean, if you look at the word humanitas, you know, humanitas, human, but you know, being Greek background, it's anthropos. I mean, means to look up. Anthropos, to look up.
That's really interesting. I haven't thought to compare those before. Thank you for bringing that up.
Mhm.
What am I looking up at? You know,
That's a good question.
Jennifer, am I aiming higher? Because that's how I see it. I see it in my life. I need to aim higher every day. No matter how many years God gives me, Jennifer, now I need to be aiming higher. Aiming higher in what I love, in what I admire, in what I value, you know, in friendship, in reading, in books, in nature, in music. I need to be aiming high. Now I listen to Byzantine music. You know, that music elevates me. You know, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I listen. That music really takes me to another level. You know, they reckon the Byzantine chant. You know, that music elevates you. You know, it's
Yeah.
You know, anyway.
But
Or it might
I
be
think,
Gregorian.
yeah.
If someone's a Catholic, they'll listen to the Gregorian chant. You know, that elevates it. That takes it to another heaven. You know, that makes it look up. You know.
I
Like when you
understand what Jennifer was saying, because I know for close to 15 years I worked in a school where I had to work so hard and role model what you were saying. I had to role model goodness, beauty, and truth every day, because if I actually taught it, they wouldn't listen. So how do we get them not to react when they're so far gone? So, you know, what is our role as classical educators in opening the doors for people? And as you said, Con, you know, you can respond to Byzantine music and say, can I? And when I was doing year 12 and I would start off with Byzantine music, a lot of the students would laugh because they thought that the sound wasn't right for them. And here I was, you know, in the meditative state of in my Byzantine music, and I thought I could get the students to that space, but they're so far removed from transcendence that we really have to inspire. So I think it is good to think about their reaction with the renewal, and we have to do lots of things at the same time simultaneously. So we have to be good role models. We have to show them how amazing it is that what we're experiencing. We have to take them there. We have to cross thresholds with them. That's the article that I'm writing this month, actually, about crossing thresholds and going into that. I'm writing it for ACES. It's taken me 2 months, but that's all right.
I love the idea of thresholds. I think that's such a significant idea for us to think about.
And I haven't read a lot about it in this area, but I've done a lot of work on it for about 15 years with crossing thresholds and taking the students there physically and also metaphorically, and you know, getting the students, and getting the students to understand that we're going somewhere with this, but then they are having the aha moment.
Yes.
So I think there needs to be something like that implemented in there, you know, together with the mimetic teaching. I mean, the mimetic teaching is really what the Bible's all about. That's mimetic teaching. You know, you've got the Bible, whatever's in the Bible, and we teach. That's mimesis. But at the same time, there needs to be crossing thresholds, taking them there, staying with them, and spending time with them, and getting the students to get there on their own.
Yes.
So rather than saying we know it's good because we're having a good experience, we want to take them there for them to have a good experience. So I think there's a lot of work still to be done for communities like our communities in Australia and schools that, you know, where I was at, and some of the very secular schools who frown upon anything that's, you know, historical or classical. And if we could devise programs around crossing thresholds, and, you know, because they do understand the threshold concepts as well, working with threshold concepts, and then taking the students to a place, I think that we've got a better chance of opening it up and inspiring other people, really. So, you know, how do you bring truth, goodness, and beauty in your classroom? How do you inspire students to get to that place other than making them do it?
I think that's so good. Go ahead. Go ahead. I'm going to grab my copy. 1 second.
By us embodying it, Helen, but we do it by us embodying it, you know, by me being the example, like you said.
Exactly. One is ourselves, but then we have to create the movement Because sometimes they watch you, but then we have to take them by the hand.
Yes.
And you wait till you read my article, what I've done, which is what I was doing.
To answer your question, if I believe, and I'll say this slightly, if people can see that we are genuine, that we deeply want what's good for them, I think they will come to the right. Yes, I think you can't, I think, Jennifer, now you can't deceive. When someone knows who you really are, they can see your soul. They can see your beauty.
Converted.
They can see
That's
you can.
speaking to the converted. So if you,
No, I think it's across everyone. No, everyone. I think they will just see it because we're human beings, and also I've never told you that we want what's best. We want what's better. We don't like darkness. We don't like something that's broken. We want something that's going to take us
You've got
up.
groups of people who actually like what is broken. This is the whole idea. See, beauty. The idea of beauty.
Yeah, but I don't want to admit it deep, and I don't want to admit it, Helen. Yeah, you're right, but I don't want to admit it.
They could be in that space. I mean, I know people who've been in that space for so long.
They love darkness. They love evil.
And so what I'm saying is, as teachers, perhaps we could be wiser than that and try and devise programs that are going to help those students or to inspire them a little bit more.
Yeah. When you guys get to the next section on page 552, and he's talking specifically about the classics, it applies to what we're talking about right now. And I had the thought, I just started reading Ethics of Beauty, and I'm writing about beauty right now.
Yes, the one by what's his name? The Greek guy. What is
yes, I just started that. So
Yeah,
I'm writing about beauty right now, and the article I'm writing is about well, it's called the disarming beauty, increasing receptivity in the classroom. And so I'm talking about beauty as naturally like something we naturally want to take in, but because of the other things around it and how we present it, or people's narratives that they have attached to them, oftentimes create natural barriers to being receptive to it. And like the example that I was thinking of, like in America, one of the things that you hear a lot is, oh, that's a white thing, or that's a black thing. That's a white space, and that's a black space. And one of the things that triggers that is the aesthetics. That things that are classical are white and don't really belong to other people of different races, which is not true. But the way it has been presented here, and it is true, culturally speaking, and how it's shown up in the environment, not the nature of the thing itself, but the way that it has been presented. It creates a false narrative around beautiful things because people believe they don't actually belong to them, and to receive it into their soul would be an act of betrayal of who they really are in their culture.
Yes. Well, you're right.
That's
exactly right. It's interesting. The headmistress, what you just said, I just remembered what the headmistress, who's now left the school, said to me, oh no, this community, they don't believe in God, so we can't possibly show them anything to do with God. They just won't have it. There's someone who's meant to be leading the community, and it's meant to be a Christian school, saying, well, this community doesn't believe in that, so we don't want to show them that, because that's not something that's really important for them.
Yeah,
it's the narrative, as you said. So
yeah, my priest just finished writing a dissertation on narrative repentance. It's so good. It's called Narrative Repentance and True Stories of God, Self, Church, and Creation. And he addresses this very thing of, he calls it the social imaginary, and that we all have this construct, this social imaginary, this narrative of how we filter the world. And the whole point of theosis or repentance is to then develop new narratives, true narratives. But we can only view the world through the narratives that we have, whether they're false or true. We're just going to view the world through them. And that's just is how the human mind works. I thought that was, but I was really struck by something you said, Con, when you're talking about authenticity. And he gets to this later. In at the end actually of his section, chapter 6, he says, let me see if I can find it. He's talking about the primacy or of the Greeks, the Greek literature. He says, and he makes, oh gosh, where is it? Well, I can't find it exactly, but he makes the comment. I thought I wrote a note about it. He makes the comment that you can, the reason, it was just a brief comment, and he has all of these kinds of comments throughout his writings. It's like, just like he'll say something like, just by the wayside, and you're like, whoa, wait, do you know what you just said there? You just said like a whole lot in those few words. But he makes the comment, something related to the authenticity of the people who wrote the famous Greek texts. And you were saying, Khan, that if we lean into our authenticity and our real, and that people notice that, and that is what is you didn't use exactly these words, but that's what's attractive to another. And that's the same point that Irving Babbitt makes about one of the reasons why the Greek literature that we have, the classics, are so incredible, is for whatever reason, that person that in a stroke of genius or a moment of pure vulnerability was able to be fully human for a brief moment and give us this thing. And as I was thinking about that and what you said.
Yeah. Isn't that powerful, Helen? Isn't that powerful? That's how the classics are eternal. They will always speak to all ages. And you're so blessed that you live in America, Jennifer. Here in Australia, things are very difficult. But we're trying our best. But look, but I believe God is going to visit Australia. He's not going to leave us.
No, of course not. You are the right person for this. You two together are a power team. I'm just saying, like, Khan, you got the fire. You're like, I'm gonna burn this down. We're gonna get it done.
Oh yeah.
I was like, let's consider that.
I've got the passion. I can't help it.
I have to. I can't stop.
But it's good passion. It's good.
It's good. I love it. I'm the same way. I'm super expressive and like.
Yes. And
we know it's very important, don't we? We know that. Of course, this is just so important. I think that's you've got that burning desire because you know that this is so important for students and for families.
That's right.
Yeah. Yes. The starting of a movement. I'm so excited for you guys.
Thank you. We're gonna get there slowly.
Indeed. All right, let's see. There was so much good stuff in here. I'm trying to see where to go next. Okay. So I know where I'll go. So one of the, in fact, I'll read. He has really good. I'm going to send this to you, Helen, so that you can follow along. Take a photo. It's the last paragraph or the last part of section of chapter 1. His final paragraphs he's a really good writer. His final paragraphs are also very good summaries as well.
Oh, good.
Okay. So maybe let's read this last section of chapter 1 and then talk about that. Okay. He says, the human mind, if it is to keep its sanity, must maintain the nicest balance between unity and plurality. So here's another term. I mean, honestly, throughout the whole, what would be a really interesting way to read this first chapter is to just note all the dualities that he mentions throughout the whole thing and I could see writing them all down and then comparing them. Some of them are synonymous and some of them he's introducing as examples, or a different duality, but he's obsessed with dualities. Like this is, and you'll see. Okay.
That's the same as unity and diversity.
The one and the
Yeah,
many, like he keeps going back to this. This is central to him. The human mind, if it is to keep its sanity, must maintain the nicest balance between unity and plurality. There are moments when it should have the sense of communion with absolute being and of the obligation to higher standards that this insight brings. Other moments when it should see itself as but a passing phase of the everlasting flux and relativity of nature. Moments when, with Emerson, it should feel itself alone with the gods alone. And moments when, with Saint Beuve, it should, if that's how you pronounce it, it should look upon itself as only the most fugitive of illusions in the bosom of an infinite illusion. If man's nobility lies in his kinship to the one, he is, and that makes me wonder if he's Christian. Like that seems like a Christian thing to say. So he is at the same time a phenomenon among other phenomena, and only at his risk and peril neglects his phenomenal self. The humane, so that's one like idea that he's giving in response to, is it the individual or the community? Because earlier on, he was really like, he was talking about the neglect of the individual, and then cultural responses that are trying to protect society from the individual. So it's like this constant war of the individual versus the community. And he was pointing to that as the cause for these cultural downfalls and extreme reactions to the cultural stuff. And so that, like, for me, one of the takeaways for me was, let my pursuit of the true, the good, and the beautiful, and this renewal of classical education be moderate, be both having those in harmony. How do I seek having those in harmony? Okay. The humane poise of his faculties suffers equally from an excess of naturalism and an excess of supernaturalism. Again, the poise of his faculties. Remember, that's what he said is the cultivated man. Those is the perfected faculties, which is the liberal arts. Like that's what the liberal arts do. That's the whole function of the liberal arts, is to perfect our intellectual faculties. We have seen how the Renaissance protested against the supernaturalist excess of the Middle Ages, against a one-sidedness that widened unduly the gap between nature and human nature. Since that time, the world has been tending to opposite extremes, not content with establishing a better harmony between nature and human nature. That's humanist. That's the, if like we could say, like, I mean, he gives a definition for humanist. Let me see if I can, humanist. Oh, here it is. The humanist, that this is on page 542. Second paragraph. The humanist then, as opposed to the humanitarian, is interested in the perfecting of the individual rather than in schemes for the elevation of mankind as a whole. And although he allows largely for sympathy, he insists that it be disciplined and tempered by judgment. And so compare that with this statement right here. Since that time, the world has been tending to the opposite extreme, not content with establishing a better harmony between nature and human nature. I see that as another way of saying humanist. Like, this is what we're up to if we're humanists, is harmonizing
a relation
nature with human nature. It would close up the gap entirely. Man, according to the celebrated dictum of Spinoza, which is somebody he discusses earlier, is not in nature as one empire in another empire, but as a part in a whole. Important faculties that the supernaturalist allowed to decay, the naturalist has cultivated, but other faculties, especially those relating to the contemplative life, are becoming atrophied through long disuse. Man has gained immensely in his grasp on facts, but in the meanwhile has become so immersed in their multiplicity, unity and multiplicity, as to lose that vision of the one by which his lower self was once overawed and restrained. There are two laws discrete, as Emerson says in his memorable lines. And since we cannot reconcile the law for man and the law for thing, he would have us preserve our sense for each separately and maintain a sort of double consciousness, a public and a private nature. And he adds in a curious image that a man must ride alternately on the horses of these two natures, which is an interesting shift of Plato's vision of the soul. Plato has, I don't know if you're familiar with that part, where he had his idea of the soul is that your reason is the charioteer and the two horses are your appetites and your affections, and the reason has to manage both so that they're not going in these crazy directions. But here Emerson changes that and set and you're riding each one. You never put them in harmony. You have to jump back and forth to each horse to manage each individually. As the equestrians in the circus throw themselves nimbly from horse to horse, or plant one foot on the back of one and the other foot on the back of the other. There is perhaps too much of this spiritual circus riding in Emerson. Unity and plurality appear too often in his work, not as reconciled opposites, but as clashing antinomies. He is too satisfied with saying about half the time that everything is like everything else, and the rest of the time that everything is different from everything else. And so his genius has elevation and serenity indeed, but at the same time, a disquieting vagueness and lack of grip in dealing with particulars. I think that line is so powerful for us for speaking about the classical movement, because we tend to be very philosophical and very hot, pie in the sky. Like ideals are important to us. And I think that's good. And I think this is our temptation, is to be geniuses, to be really smart about things, have this elevation and serenity, but lack grip in dealing with the particulars. A theory that doesn't work in reality is a bad theory.
Yes.
That's interesting, fascinating.
Thoughts?
See, there's a lot. It covers a lot. It's such a small.
I have a question, Helen and Jennifer. What does it say on page 548 that if man, like you said, if man's nobility, page 548, if man's nobility lies in his kinship to the one, he is at the same time a phenomenon among other phenomena. I'm not a phenomenon. I'm a man. I'm a human being. I don't understand why he calls me a phenomenon. Can you say? I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, my first question is, what does he mean by that? And I was a little confused by that line as well. So the first question I think is important to ask is, what does he mean by phenomena? I feel like he's referring to something else that maybe I don't know. So maybe there's some background knowledge there. That was my first thought. What do you think, Helen?
Yeah, I read that as well, but I thought he was, I don't know why.
You're not a phenomenon, Marissa.
Another phenomenon.
You're humans. You're a person. Yeah. I prefer the word person.
Same time, a phenomenon among other phenomena.
Not so poor.
Maybe he's comparing. Well, he should have said human among other phenomena, but at the same time, a phenomenon among other phenomena.
Yeah, I prefer the word person. I know. Do you prefer the word person, Jennifer and Helen? I love the word person.
Well, okay, so I looked up the definition. So we're here to define our terms, right?
Yes.
Okay, so
generous.
So this is the definition of phenomenon: a fact or situation that is observed to exist or happen, especially one whose cause or explanation is in question. Or 2, a remarkable person, thing, or event. And then in philosophy, the object of a person's perception, what the senses or the mind notice.
Okay. Phenomenon.
So, okay, so so if man's nobility lies in his kinship to the one, he is at the same time a phenomenon among other phenomena. So yeah. So
Neglect is
what I'm
phenomenal.
in order to understand this sentence, we have to have a good understanding of what he means by the one. And
Yeah.
then before I feel like that's the first step, which I feel like I only know that a little bit. Like I feel like I could understand that better, and that would help me understand this sentence better.
Is the one God, Jennifer? I hope so.
Well, he
For me,
has one capitalized. That's why it makes me think God, because normally, unless, can you also capitalize well-known? Because this is also like a well-known philosophical concept. No, it would only be capitalized if it was a proper noun.
yeah, kinship to the
So
one.
otherwise it would be,
To the
I mean,
Lord.
just to say the one and the many, because that's something they say all the time in philosophy, like it's a common thing. But do they ever capitalize it? I guess my question is, do they ever capitalize the one and the many? Like, is it an official title?
That's
So
a
I'm
good
wondering that, because if it is, then maybe it's not talking about God. But also, like if he's talking from a Christian perspective, we would believe that, I mean, the one,
We believe in one God, Almighty.
but I
Of
don't
heaven
think
and
he's,
earth.
yeah.
I see from that aspect, Helen and Jennifer. Anyway, who knows? He might be a hidden Christian, a hidden
Yeah,
Christian.
latent.
He might be
Yeah,
what's the word? Latent. Yeah, that's right.
I
Not,
thought latent.
yeah, a latent. Is that right? A latent. Yeah, doesn't want to make it obvious, but he's sort of who knows? Anyway, the vision of the
I'll have
one.
to, I've
It's
got to
always
read a
got
little bit more. Nobility lies in his kinship to the one.
So maybe he just, I wonder by phenomenon if he, I have to come back, I have to step away from the one for a second.
Among other phenomenon.
I wonder
Okay.
if by phenomenon he means that we exist. Is it the first
Neglects
definition?
Might be that. Yeah, it might be that. Phenomenal. That I'm an existence. I'm out there. I'm real. Yeah, maybe that's
So
right,
does it,
Helen.
well, let's
And
say it that way. He is at the same time existing among others that exist, and only at his risk and peril neglects his existing self. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Or does that feel like
Yeah,
imposing meaning that's not there?
Yeah, his existing self, his real self. Yeah. Enough. Yeah, that's good way to paraphrase it. Yeah, to put in another. Yeah.
Remarkable person.
It's very strong language. This is very deep. Would you say, Jennifer?
Oh,
This is very deep.
yes.
Oh
This
yeah,
is deep.
it covers so much and such. You couldn't possibly read. We have to do one page at a time.
That's right.
Oh,
This
I
is
know.
deep. It's
We were
strong. It's
last
strong.
night we were commenting on that. Normally I can get through one of these readings in a couple hours, and it was like 4 hours, and we're like still going and like pausing,
still
taking
going.
notes, making connections.
Oh
Yes.
Yeah.
yeah, I have to read a little bit more.
Kinship. If man's nobility lies in his kinship to the one. I am so curious about that. I feel like I need to do more research to really understand what he means by the one there and what that refers to. But I'm definitely curious about that.
Well, it's obviously something sacred.
Yeah,
wouldn't
I
have a
mean, the
capital
fact
letter.
that one is capitalized is what
Yeah.
gives me pause. Does he mean Christ the incarnate one? Is that a thing? I don't even know if I'm saying
That's
true
what normally
things. I'm
they
just
do
saying
with the one.
things. Yeah.
Because even in the Matrix, they've got the one. They use the one, so that's probably
Yes.
I
Yes.
think.
Well, if I could just say this now, Helen and Jennifer, whereas have you read David Hicks' Norms and Nobility, Jennifer? Yeah,
Oh,
I know
yeah.
that. Yeah. Well,
It's
in
up
that
there
book,
and it's dog-eared and highlighted and written all over.
I know that Helen's also that David Hicks does mention Christ, the Logos. Now, he says it specifically in his book that that's why I like that too. Yeah, but anyway, but look, I love David Hicks. He's good. Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah. So okay. So he ends this section by saying, man himself and the products of his spirit, which I love that line, language and literature, are treated not as having a law of their own, but as things as entirely subject to the same methods that have won for science such triumphs over phenomenal nature. Well, there's that word phenomenal again. Okay,
That
we get
word
to
again, that
compare
word
how he's
that-
using it to get clear.
Yeah.
The president, and what's happening, I love that this is happening with us right now, because like whenever that thing comes up in us where there's that resistance, like wait, but
Yes.
that's what happens in our students. And like
Mm.
when we are leading them to truth, goodness, and beauty, like that's
Yes.
what the resistance feels
That's
like.
the resistance. Yeah, that's
And
what it
they
feels like.
feel that same thing.
Yeah.
And that's where we get to do what you were talking about, Helen, and in the threshold, how do we lead through this dark, you
That is
can't
so
really see
important.
it, but like look at
Yeah.
how we navigated it just now. Like we
Yeah.
had this, I mean, we don't have an answer exactly for what that sentence means. Maybe
No,
we have
but
more answers than we did
We're sort
before.
of holding each other's hands, we're going
Right.
through it.
And we had to hold space for each other's concerns and like, hey, I don't like this. Okay, cool, let's look at it. But we didn't dismiss each other. If we had done that, we would have shut it down like completely.
Yeah.
Like I love like the example that this moment was also in, like, this is how we play in the threshold together.
Yeah.
And he says he says the humanities need to be defended today against the encroachments of physical science as they once needed to be. As they once needed to be against the encroachment of theology. And so that's like the ending line. So again, going back to these extremes. And I think this is so important in our discussion of the renewal, because that is our tendency. And he says this so many times throughout this text, is we have this human tendency to go to extremes. The extremes of physical science or theology, the extremes of romanticism or empiricism. Like we just tend to go to extremes. And he really sees
So true.
Yeah, the cultivated man is the one. He's like, we need it. Where was it? Yeah. It's at the end of the second section. He says, yes, page 558. He says, 558. There is needed in the classics today a man who can understand the past with the result of not loosening, but of strengthening his grasp upon the present. There is needed a type of scholar intermediary between the high school pedagogue and the university specialist who can interpret the classics in a large and liberal spirit to American or Australian undergraduates, carrying with him into his task the consciousness that he is forming the minds and the characters of future citizens of a republic or whatever your government structure is. I love this because it's a physical embodied example of and he says it many other times in different ways. He keeps calling for the man that can harmonize the one and the many. He is insistent that is the solution. The man that can harmonize the one and the many, or woman, man isn't human.
Yes, one harmonize the one and the many. Yes,
unity and diversity.
unity.
Say that again.
It is about unity and diversity, but
unity and diversity.
It hasn't been translated correctly. Everyone thinks diversity means diverse in nature, but diversity is many differences in nature. I can't remember what it's called now. Diverse in nature. Unity and in diversity is the ultimate, really. That's what we're aiming for. I'll have to get a definition for that. So it's the one who can harmonize the one and the many.
Yeah.
Well, that's to unite. Unity in diversity.
He says it very explicitly about Plato.
Let's have a look. I'll see what I've got for unity and diversity. I've got.
Oh yeah, here it is. This one made me think about Christ. It's on page 547. He said, there is the one. Oh, okay. This may give us an answer a little bit to our question about one. We'll see if it does. It's all, he has the one capitalized everywhere he says it, actually. Okay, so I need a, there is the one, says Plato, and there is the many. Show me the man who can combine the one with the many, and I will follow in his footsteps, even as in those of a god. To harmonize the one with the many, this is indeed a difficult adjustment. Perhaps, and I mean, isn't that Christ, the one who can harmonize the one and the many? This is, I mean, this is what he does. He's like, he who has sinned, throw the first stone. Yeah, okay, she's an adulteress, stoner. And he who has sinned, throw the first stone, harmonizing the one and the many. To harmonize the one and with the many, this is indeed a difficult adjustment, perhaps the most difficult of all, and so important withal that nations have perished from their failure to achieve it. Ancient India was devoured by a too overpowering sense of the one. The failure of Greece, on the other hand, to attain to this restraining sense of unity led at last to the pernicious pliancy of the hungry Greekling, whose picture Juvenal has drawn.
Yeah.
And this is what's concerning me. And I don't know if I would say concern. Yeah, like really giving me pause about our work in the movement is, and it makes me respect the mentors that I see being very patient even more. Because I tend to be, I'm super energetic and expressive. I'm like, yeah, let's do it. Let's go for it. But like, am I being moderate? Am I really thinking about, am I going to extremes? Have I thought through the harmony of this? Is it harmonized in myself? Because whatever I create, it's going to be an embodiment of what is harmonized or not harmonized in myself. And I'll produce more of that in the world. And do we want to be producing? Isn't it the right time? You know, I think for me, those were the big questions that were coming up.
Jennifer, on the American coins, don't you have a pluribus unum, out of the many one?
Oh, I always forget that we have cool stuff sometimes.
Yeah, on the coins. So I was teaching the students that, and we actually got the coins. So on the coins, you've got a pluribus unum, out of the many one. That means unity and diversity. Ultimately, that's what we're aiming for.
Yeah.
But how does that happen? That's the whole idea. How do we get to okay, so we've got,
well, I think that, go ahead.
So could I just share my thoughts? And look, as a Christian, I'm a monotheist, so I give allegiance to one God. But at the same time, I realize that I live in a society where there are many people, many other souls. But I think it's important that I always come back to the one. So he's trying to say that we need to, but by saying, yes, I know that there are other people around me, there is a world, but I give allegiance to that one God. And I think that oneness keeps me stable in life. You know, God is my reference point. I come back to that one true God. Like, you know, but at the same time, and I want to share this with you slowly, Helen and Jennifer. I think of the Trinity, you know, one and many.
Trinity.
Like, you know,
that's what the Trinity is.
Father, Son, the Holy Spirit. Is that maybe many? I mean,
that's unity and diversity. No, because you've got.
That's my.
Yeah, that's really good.
That's the definition.
This is logical now.
Like, really, the one and the many, harmonizing that as a Trinitarian pursuit.
Because even though we say there's one, I'm not a priest, and maybe your priest can say better than this, Jennifer, but you know, the three persons have got their own unique personhood, is that right? But they're still part of that one. But we say one Godhead. Listen, one Godhead, three persons.
But it's unity in that diversity, and you've got the peripatetic dance, perichoresis.
Yes, thank you. So that's what I'm trying to say. So I feel comfortable with the oneness, the Godhead, and also the three different persons, Father, Son, Holy Spirit. But yeah, as you were reading that slowly, Jennifer, I was just coming there. The Trinity came to my mind. I don't know, it's just Trinity,
No,
because that's
definitely.
one
Oh,
and the
that's
many.
really
One
good.
and the many, the one and the many,
One
Yeah, and
basic element that pulls it all together.
Yeah, but we can't forget the one. And when you say to balance them both, I don't know. Well, and that's why I asked you that question. Is he a Christian? Is he not? I don't know. Is he maybe a polytheist? I don't know. Maybe he I don't know. I don't know what he's it's always, I always ask that question in the phone, and what's this person's spiritual background? I think that's important. I mean, look, it's perfect it's lovely what he writes, but I just like to know what their spiritual background is.
Yeah.
I mean,
If you go back to the email that I sent yesterday, there is a link to a good article about him. So in there where you can learn more. But I usually try every month when I send out the first reminder, I try to find a quality article online about the person and include it. But there's some more stuff about him there.
Always.
But yeah, Helen, you asked the question, how do we harmonize the one and the many?
When we say that there's one Godhead, there's one, say that word, notice my words, the one Godhead. Now, as Christians, we believe in that one God. How do you harmonize that as a Christian? See,
you've got the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sanctifier.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the Holy Trinity. So that's the way that we harmonize it, by having that as a God. We've got the Godhead, but we understand that they're in perichoresis, it's called. So they're in the creative dance, perichoresis. They call it the dance. Perichoresis means perichoretic dance. So it's like they're in it together.
How do you spell that?
Perichoresis, P-E-R-I.
And then it's C-H, and then it's C-H-O-R. C-H-O-R, perichoresis, yeah. Now, that's a great theological term, yeah. That's a powerful word.
And it's a dance?
It's called the divine dance. And if you look it up, it's a Greek term, it's a theological Greek term. And it's about how you get unity and diversity through the perichoretic dance, through the movement of the Holy Trinity. So you've got the Creator, the Redeemer, and the Sanctifier. And they three combined become God, obviously. But each one has a purpose. So you've got your sanctified, you've got your redeemed, and you're created.
But no, as Orthodox Christians, we say, Jennifer and Hannah, God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. We come back to the word God, that one. See, it comes back to one. We come back to that one. We come, but then we say God the Father, God the Son, God the Holy Spirit. So,
If you want to read more about this,
you can
read Christos Genaris. I don't know if you've ever read any of his works.
Genaris.
He's excellent. Genaris.
Have you read his books, Jennifer?
I've never heard of him. Who is he again?
I'll go and find one.
Christos. Well, I will send you the link, the free links, if I can find them. I haven't got.
Here's one, Jennifer.
Oh, I've got that one too. I've got that one.
Yeah,
Genaris.
Genaris, yeah.
Oh, this is good, heavy reading. I think it's here we go. It's in America. Holy Orthodox Press. That's in America.
You can get it from there.
So go on. I'll just while Jennifer copies it down. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
There's a link. There's a link with all of his writings for free.
Really?
Okay. I'll find it and send it to you, because I've sent it to a few other people.
Thank you, Con. I got it. Thank you. Yes. Relational ontology. That's what I want to read. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, no, you love him.
That's gonna be Jennifer's next book club.
That's okay.
Oh my gosh, I have stacks of books everywhere.
One of his
That's a good book. Very powerful. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. He's good.
What was one of his?
Oh my goodness, this has been delightful. Do you guys have any final thoughts or anything that you want to say about the reading?
Oh, sorry. Personhood is one of the essays I'll send you. Personhood by Christos Genaris.
Yes, Personhood. Yes.
Oh, thank you. That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
No,
Oh,
I
geez,
just
we've
want to
covered a lot
thank
of
you,
ground.
Jennifer. I want to thank you for the 1 hour.
Thank you, Jennifer,
It's
for
been
doing this.
so powerful. Seriously, I speak the truth. It's been powerful. I've enjoyed the dialogue. We're nutting it out. We're like we're being Socratic, we're coming to the
I
truth, and
love it.
we're questioning. I love that. I just really like
Yeah,
that.
that's what I think as
Yeah.
well.
Yes, I've thoroughly enjoyed. Best way to start a Friday morning ever.
Oh, yeah, what morning we're going to bed.
The best way to end the Friday night. It's 10:30 p.m. now. I'm gonna go sleep like a
Don't give
baby.
me,
I'm
don't
going
give
to
it away.
read
Don't
now.
tell me what happens yet.
No.
No.
I feel like this is like some weird mystical, like, oh, you are from the future. I get to speak to you. You have more wisdom than me. You've experienced this day, and I don't know what it's going to bring
We've
yet.
got the Greek language.
Good on you,
And
man.
I've taught theology for so long.
That's been
Oh,
great,
my
Jennifer.
goodness.
It's been great.
It's
Yes,
exciting.
well,
Thank you, Jennifer, so much. We do appreciate.
Yeah.
oh,
Um,
it's my pleasure. It's
So
my
the
pleasure.
next one, Jennifer, is August 26th on Xenophon. I'm just reading it. I pinned
Yes,
it out.
that is correct. So
Yeah, I pinned it
Xenophon,
August 26th.
and it appears there will be a very short reading, only about 10 pages. So from the memorabilia,
Okay.
page 30. So yes, that will be about, well,
Yep.
he pays tribute to his teacher Socrates, providing a different perspective from Plato's better known account of their mentor. Okay, so we get to talk more Socrates and hear from another person. Ooh, I'm excited. Okay,
and I'll
cool.
send you some of my Socratic lessons as well. I'll send you some
Beautiful.
so you can just have a look how I
Yeah, awesome.
conduct
Thank
my
you.
Socratic work.
Yes.
And Jennifer, if you want to write an article for our newsletter anytime, it's your call. You write articles because Helen's
Oh,
writing an
Jennifer's good.
article
I love Jennifer's articles.
Yeah. So
I
feel free
take
to,
long, but
and we'll put it on. Can we put it on the website too, Jennifer? We'll put it on
Of
the
course.
website. We'll put it on Facebook. We'll put the name Jennifer Dow. It'll be out there. Australia's going to publicize your name, mate. Don't worry.
I did tell the last reading group about you, and some of the girls were going to join, but obviously it must
Oh,
be
they're
hard.
going to come. Oh, good.
Yeah, there was some.
Well, I'll send out the recording sometime today, and so if they're not on the email list, you can just tell that I publish the recordings on YouTube so people can watch them afterwards, so they can definitely have access there.
And
this has been delightful. I can't wait until next time. Thank you so much.
Jennifer, when do you celebrate your name day? Your name day, Jennifer. You're
Orthodox. So Genevieve is my saint, my patron saint, and that's January 3rd. My name day is
January 3rd. So Genevieve, your name, okay.
Yes.
Because I follow the Synaxarion, there's all the Orthodox saints. Have you got the Synaxarion list? Have you got it, Helen and Jennifer? I've
got it, with all the dates, with all the feast days.
Oh, yeah.
Have you got these?
Yes, I don't have them, but I have them at my church. So I'll look
powerful, Helen. These are gems.
I didn't see that one.
There's actually a podcast that
really good, Helen. Geelong Monastery, Helen. Geelong Monastery. Go to Geelong Monastery.
I haven't been there for a while.
They're $50 each, Helen. $50 each, but they're gems. They're gems. Yeah, I bought.
Buying a book a week.
So your church has got them, yeah. So your name day is on January, so we can say Klonya Pula, as we say in Greek. Helen, we can say happy name day.
Jennifer. Yeah.
Jennifer.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Have a beautiful day.
You as well. Oh, Con, you would probably like this podcast. It's by Ancient Faith. It's Saint of the Day, a daily, and so it every day it's like a 5-minute podcast, just telling the story of another saint.
I listen to I love Ancient Faith. Yes, Cyril Jenkins. Have you heard of Professor Cyril Jenkins, Helen and Jennifer? He speaks on Ancient Faith. Yeah, he classical education. Chrysostom Academy and Saint Constantine Academy in America. He talks about that. Yeah,
I saw that on your Instagram.
Jenkins.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, so many good thoughts. Well, I can't wait to do this again. You guys are brilliant, amazing, and until next time, my friends.
Yeah, we'll see you again.
Have the best Friday.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.